I think it's inevitable there'll be, and I really hope I'm wrong, but I think with the amount of people being released early, I think it's inevitable we'll see some form of increase, slight increase in some aspects of crime, depending what the crime is. And it's always described as low-level crime, isn't it? Your thefts, your burglaries. So not the serious types of crime, the serious sexual offences, the serious physical injuries, assaults. I'm not so sure you'll see an increase in that aspect. And policing normally has been quite adept in some areas of identifying offenders for those more serious types of offences. But I think your burglaries, your theft of and theft from vehicles, the assaults on the and it sounds awful, the low level, I think you will see an increase in some of those types of offences because of the number of individuals that have been released early. I think normally the government line, or the line you get back from most people when they're answering questions on these lines is, well, obviously there's measures we can put in place, like protection notices, protection orders, that will prevent these individuals when they're released from reoffending in like a domestic abuse or domestic assault type line. But that's on the preconception that you're going to put an order on somebody that they're going to abide by. And most of these individuals, because they've broken law already, because else they wouldn't be in the position they're in, aren't going to abide by a piece of paper that tells them they can't do something. That's why they're in the position they're in. So I think there's a bit of smoke and mirrors going on here. We've got measures we can put in place that will protect victims of like domestic type crimes. I think I'd agree with some of those women's groups, etc., who are raising this concern. There should be significant concerns about some individuals who've been let out on the street. Clearly, they can't be kept in custody forever, and we have to have some form of management process to try and stop them reoffending or even re-educating them. But for many, that clearly that doesn't work, and that hasn't worked. So I think it's a real concern that you could get people committing offences who, in the best will of the world, should still have been in custody if their full sentence, or at least the majority of their original sentence, was being served. And the only reason they're out on the street is because of a lack of prison places. We come back to the original cause and effect was the fact there's not enough prison places to keep locked up people who've committed offences and been given a sentence that they should be serving at least the majority of, if not all of it, to protect vulnerable people. I think inevitably when we look at it, and policing gets lots of criticism about not detecting crimes, not arresting offenders. Clearly, there's something that's been done correctly, or else our prisons wouldn't be full of people who've committed offences. Police have done their utmost to identify, arrest, gather the evidence, in many cases convict a jury that this person's guilty of an offence. They've then received the sentence, and we're now in a position where actually there isn't a place to put them because we haven't got enough prison places. So this issue has been flagged up, identified by senior police officers for some time to government officials, the previous government, and little or nothing has been done to deal with it, to remedy it, to put the measures in place, the probation service, the locations or places for some of these individuals to be put when they're released from prison, rehabilitation. There's some people that clearly are just not interested in rehabilitating or finding another path other than committing crime. So I think we inevitably need places in prison for those types of individuals. So when they are arrested, charged and convicted, that the justice system has got somewhere to put them, and somewhere to put them for the right period of time, rather than after serving 40% of the sentence, then you're released. Because it just seemed to me, look at those images the other day, it was almost like a party environment, a party celebration when they come out of prison early. It was like the end of a holiday for some of them. It was like, see you next time, see you in another place. So as a former police officer, I was just looking through, not all of them. Some of them would inevitably try and find a better path, a better life. But I would say a significant number of those individuals will be reoffending and will be back before a court in a short period of time. Based on my experience, when I've looked around at the types of offenders that I was arresting, speaking to, frequently, as in you're arresting people, the same person on a frequent basis. For some, not all, but for some of them, rehabilitation clearly doesn't work. It's either not the correct or the right rehabilitation schemes once they get in the prison environment, or it's not working for whatever reason. I think there needs to be an effective deterrent, whether that is longer custodial sentences, and as you just mentioned, that brings its own inherent problems with places, etc. But I've spoken to too many offenders who almost view prison as a slightly an occupational hazard and not something to be that wary of once they've been inside once or twice. I've heard them literally swapping prison locations, like we would swap holiday destinations. You know, have you been to this prison? Have you been to that prison? What was that like? Who, you know, what sort of, you know, what prison officers did you speak to? Who did you have on your landing, etc.? They swap them like holiday destinations. So it doesn't, you know, based on my experience, there doesn't seem to be an effective deterrent from imprisonment. But for me, there needs to be some element of punishment, of a deterrent, to stop people committing crime in the first place. And it seems that for whatever reason, imprisonment doesn't seem to hold the same deterrent effect it would for me, maybe people like me, as it does to some of the people I used to arrest. It's almost like an occupational hazard for them. So I'd fall on the lines of, I think there needs to be more effective deterrent. If that is longer sentences, then make it longer sentences. There's, you know, the offenders I were arrested, some of them had like 50, 60, 70 previous convictions, which is astonishing. And they've only been in prison like 4 or 5 times. So when you look at the previous offending history of some of these people, before they get sentenced to a term of imprisonment, they've probably had, you know, almost like into double figures previous convictions. And they've been through the community service, they've been through like orders, probation service, etc. They've been through so many different means of punishment or deterrent before they ever get a custodial sentence imposed on them, that by the time they get to a custodial sentence, it has no real deterrent for them. So I think the justice system needs an overhaul. I think it needs a significant look at if there are better means of rehabilitation and moving people away from a life of crime. But if you go through the majority of people that commit offences, when you look at their previous convictions, it's into double figures and more with some of them. It's astonishing when you see how many previous offences some offenders have got once you get them to court. I've seen too many people go to court and almost get what I would term lighter sentences. So I think there needs to be a more deterrent factor put into committing crime. If that's longer sentences, then I think I've seen too many people given what I would term a light sentence or a shorter sentence, and then they tell you, I'm not going to do the full time anyway. I'm going to come out after 50% of it. I'll get early release, etc. So it's almost like they know the system so well. They know it better than I do, and most police officers, because we don't experience that side of things. So I think for me, for some offenders, longer sentences has to be a consideration. But it's almost like, clearly rehabilitation isn't working for the majority of people. So there's something fundamentally wrong with how we imprison people, how we confine and detain them, and what happens to them once they're behind those walls. We're just literally, for some people, it's almost like a university of crime. They go in there, and when they come out, they're almost like a better criminal than when they went in, because they learn from other people they're associating with. So they get told about police tactics, and they get told about different crimes they could commit, and maybe they'll change from committing one type of offence to another because it seems to be more lucrative, or even you get less of a sentence for it because it's not as impacted. So these are sort of there's like a sharing scheme going on in some prison establishments with offenders. So sometimes actually it has a completely opposite effect than what society probably thinks prison does to people. It doesn't deter them. It doesn't make them in some cases, a better person. It actually makes them a better criminal, or a more practiced criminal, because they learn about it a lot more. So I think as I said, I think the justice system, the prison system, needs urgent review as to what happens to somebody once they get imprisoned, and the length of the sentence for some of the types of offences. And if you're committing offences more than once, you're convicted of offences more than once or twice or 3 times, then maybe there should be, a part of the sentence that's added on for committing multiple offences or frequent offences, as opposed to now. And I think it's almost like it's taken almost on a standalone basis. We'll convict you for this offence. We'll take into account to a certain degree some of your previous offending history, but it doesn't seem to be any almost like factor or time period of imprisonment added on because of your previous offending history.